Okay, now we're on official, Brian. We have to be, you know, proper.
Yeah, that's right.
We have to be professional now. Yeah, we have worked together in the past for running NASA's largest undergraduate internship program. And Brian has been a great asset for us in the space because he's got a wealth of information. And we brought him in today to talk about the resumes, thinking about interviews, job interviews, getting you ready for those next steps. Internship program applications are about to be, you know, upon us. We want to give you enough time, and this is why we're rolling this into the sequence right now. We want to give you enough time to be thinking about getting all of your paperwork and letters of recommendation and things, starting to track those in terms of getting them ready for the actual um, submission season, which will be in the fall. And so to do that, I think that we want to cover some of these bases where a lot of people, you know, wonder about things. We get a lot of questions about this, and this is why we're bringing Mr. Dansbury in. So with that, if you've got any questions, we do have some things going on with Titan. The PMs, just as a preface real quick, the PMs should have a posting that has some instrument costs that we've been able to track down for you, some general instruments that are within the spaceflight, you know, programs that are out there around the solar system. And so we wanted to give you at least some ideas. We're also working on a training possibly next week, I think, for the tool that actually has some of the planetary surfaces. It's called JMARS, but it's J Solar System, basically Java Solar System. And it's a tool that the professional community uses for all the bodies in the solar system. And so I think we're going to introduce the Titan, J Titan, to you next week and give you some operability in terms of looking the way that the scientists and engineers and other people working on these different bodies have access to. It's a professional tool, but we're going to give you access as well. So that'll be next week. And so if you do have questions, and I know some of you have been sending them, we're trying to get through those as quickly as we can and getting you the information you need. Again, if you have any questions, send them to LaSpace. Dan and I both get those, and we try and get those answers to you as quickly as we can. All right. And no, Carlos, that's a great question. Are we going to have a session next week? No, you have next week off. It's the week of the 4th of July. We know a lot of people travel, have family outings, those kinds of things. So we've actually planned to have that week off. So you'll have your holiday weekend or holiday week to do as you wish. And then we'll be back the following week. So we'll send out a reminder just to say, you know, looking for you the following week, which should be the, let's see, it'll be the 2nd, so it'll be the 9th of July. Gosh, it's July already. Can you all believe that? It's gone by fast.
It
So
amazes me. I set up a meeting with somebody for next Thursday, and they politely declined my meeting today. Said that
what?
they
You're not
really would like to meet with me, but not on July 4th, please.
Oh, yep. The government doesn't necessarily work on federal holidays. So, and yes, Fatima, we are getting the answers. Dan is on vacation. He had sent me that spreadsheet, so we will go ahead and finish out the rest of the Q&A. And I think it was, and we'll get that posted as well. And Enrique, you're wondering, I think, let me check the text from Dan, and so I can make sure that I am saying the right thing. I thought he put it on the PM Trello board, but let me look. I'm pretty sure that was it. If it's not, then I'll correct that later after Brian gets started. We don't want to take too much time. All right. With that, Brian, why don't we go ahead and if you've got questions in the chat, we'll try and throw them at Brian on the way and go ahead and be able to do it. It's on the PM, thanks Eddie, it's on the PM Trello board in terms of the instruments. And these are general instruments, and you'll be able to see it. Scroll down, it's at the bottom of tools and resources. Thanks Eddie, that's great. Okay, Francisco, thanks a lot. Okay, so with little more, you all got Brian's resume, and we'll go ahead and just go from there. So take it off, Brian.
Thanks, Sherry. And definitely send questions. And I know that Sherry will not be shy and interrupt me when she either catches something that I haven't said or there's a really good question out there. So with this will be as informative as you all make it with your good questions. So just to, because I think it's always important for you to know the background of the person that's talking to you. Wasn't that long ago in my mind anyway, when I was on the other side of the computer in your shoes as an undergraduate engineering student and, trying for my first co-op and internship opportunities. I was just very lucky to get one at NASA's Langley Research Center. And that allowed me I ended up doing 6 rotations before I got my undergraduate engineering degree. And that, of course, really helped to make my resume look good, got me the job at NASA. And then once I was doing wind tunnel work at NASA, I was able to be the mentor for interns and co-ops for the next 5 or 6 years at Langley. And I eventually left NASA. I was at the University of Cincinnati for a while, so I ran the undergraduate aerospace and biomedical co-op programs at that university for about 6 or 8 years. And that brought me back to Johnson Space Center when NASA needed somebody to kind of organize and sort of put a central focus on their internship programs. And that's where Sherry and I met. Sherry and I basically got to be partners in crime running an internship program at NASA, and it was a blast. And so I've been involved basically on both sides of the fence with these experiential programs, since the 80s, shall we say. So, all right, without any further ado, this is a presentation that I cobbled together from some of my colleagues and experts in the field. And there's more slides and more information than we can reasonably talk through. So I'm not going to talk to every bullet on every slide.
And Brian,
research. Yeah.
We already have a question. So what's the difference between a co-op and an internship?
That's a good one. I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a mandatory co-op program. And think of a co-op program as a series of internships that's built into the curriculum. So I went to the University of Cincinnati. It takes 5 years to get an undergraduate engineering degree at the University of Cincinnati. And during those 5 years, you're going to get at least 1 year of experience in the workforce in your field before you graduate. So co-op programs tend to be set up such that you're going to be 1 semester at the workplace, the next semester back at school, and you're going to rotate that at least 2 or 3 times so that you get experience in different parts of the same employer, or in some cases you might change to a different employer. So that's the key difference between co-op is a little more organized. You tend to get increasing levels of responsibility as you go along. An internship is, you've got it, you got 1 internship. When it's over, there's no guarantee you're going to get another one with that employer. So now you're looking for your next internship, or you're going on to have graduated and gotten your job. Anything else you'd think to add, Sherry?
Nope, that's good.
All right, if I hit the right keyboard. Oh, wow, we're into our first problem here, and that is that my computer is not,
well, I tell you what, I can share them. Why don't we just go ahead and you stop sharing and I'll pull them up.
I got it now.
All right.
We're gonna make this happen. Okay, so we're gonna talk resume development for a little while, and then we're gonna talk interviews, and then we're gonna kind of talk about what's the perspective of the employer when they're doing the interviewing, and what should your perspective be. And then we're hopefully going to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. And Terry and I actually talked, and there's a couple of videos I have lined up if we've got some extra time, just to talk about research that goes on the space station, because it's fun to talk about that stuff. So resume development. The important thing I want you to take away from here is every one of you has marketable skills. It doesn't matter if you've only worked a little bit, if you've worked in fast food, if you've worked at 7-Eleven, you have marketable skills to put on your resume. It's really important, and particularly as in the last few years, I work in the program science office for the International Space Station, and the majority of my job is basically working on the communication plans or writing for the general public to explain the kinds of stuff we do on station. So I've kind of learned as a second career how to write and how to do communications. And it's always very important to know what your audience is and what is the action you want to get that audience to take from what you're doing. So a resume is a communications method. You're looking to create that interest and in the end provoke that action to get an interview. One of my colleagues always talked about the 5 C's of a resume, and I think it's so important that I actually copied this slide, and you're going to see it later on in the presentation when we finish up this section. Be clean, concise, correct, concrete, and give yourself credit for stuff. This is the opportunity, and for those of us that in the sciences, we tend to be a little self-deprecating. We're team players. We want to give credit to everybody around us. This is the opportunity, and it's very important in this venue that you give yourself the credit that you earned for what you're doing. And correct. Have as many eyes look at your resume as possible. There's no way one single human being will find every error in their resume. Use all the resources at your disposal. Use the university, use your friends, use your family. Have everybody take a look at your resume and make sure you don't have any mistakes in it. I have seen some really entertaining mistakes in my time. All right, talking about the order of items on a resume. Obviously, you've got your header to start out with. Typically, you're going to go education, experience, and then we're going to talk about skills and qualifications. Now, later in your life, once you have a lot more experience than you have education, you might put the experience at the top. But this is typically the way on internships we see things go. And we'll talk about, what skills and qualifications you might want to put down there. You will all have some specific questions about your specific set of experiences and what might be good on there, and throw those out. And hopefully, Sherry, you can filter them, and by those examples of your questions, will give you all a clear idea of what's important to put on a resume. Optional categories are the kinds of things where it depends. If you've got a lot of achievements, scholarships, awards, maybe you want that separate category to talk about those things. If you want to talk about specifically activities or interests or something particular in your background, there's your opportunity to do that as well. But these are kind of, as space is available, you want to make sure you cover the most important stuff, which is your work background, your academic background, and what kind of skills you have that you want the employer to know. So heading, you want to make it stand out. You definitely want to put your name in there, put the phone number that you're going to be paying attention to and answering and checking messages early. So 21st century, that's a cell phone these days. Put a good email address on there. The story I like to tell about that is I was teaching a class of about 120 students, and I I had taken all their resumes to get a first look at their first drafts, and I put it up on one of them up on the projector, and I covered up everything about the resume except the header. And there were about 100 kids in the class that day. And I asked them, I said, just look at this header information and tell me, just based on that, will you interview this particular candidate? And out of that 100 students, only one of them raised their hand. That would be the person whose resume it was, because their email address was deathbringer429@gmail.com. Now, that was very entertaining when they were in high school and they created that email address. I'm sure that their character in World of Warcraft was awesome, and they did a lot of death bringing in that environment. That's not the kind of email address you want to have when you're going out and trying to present yourself as a professional. So the class got a big kick out of that, and Deathbringer was the only one who was willing to interview himself for that position at that time. Here's a couple of examples. You can set that up. The main thing I would say is make it very easy for them to find your email address and your phone number. Objectives are something that I don't think they're needed for particularly at this stage in your career as you're just getting started and you're trying to make the transition from the academic world into the professional world. It's not very often that putting an objective down is really going to add a lot of value, because it's really tempting when you do these to use that flowery language And even when you don't, I don't know that it adds value, because if you look at these examples here, you know, a nice objective might be to find an entry level position, starting May of 2019. Well, that's great, but if you put a resume in for an entry level position, they probably already know that's what you're looking for. So you've not really added a lot of value to the resume. And you can get too flowery really quickly. You talk about working for a progressive company where you can contribute to the company growth. Okay. Now what you've told them is you don't want to work for a company that's shrinking instead of growing. So I don't know that you've added a lot of value there, is all I'm saying.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions. One is it seems that Adam attended a recent seminar that says they're starting to have a growing trend of not including a permanent address due to the new electronic age. What would you consider in terms of NASA? I mean, I think in a lot of ways, they kind of want to know where you're rooted, not just where you go to school.
I was going to say something exactly like that.
Yeah.
The value still is I get to know where geographically you come from, or where you're rooted. I can understand that, and I can see where it's a lot less important than it was, Sherry, for you and I at some point in recent past. But I would still put it on there for now, and it does. It lets people know where you came from.
And Alan says, how do you avoid needing to request letters of recommendation too frequently? When you're doing multiple applications with different companies, several of them will require a letter of rec, and I'm concerned about requesting letters for 20 positions.
Yeah, that's a fair question. When we get farther into the slides here, what you're going to see, particularly from those of us that are advising students in organized co-op and internship programs, is go ahead and ask who will, ask and get that list of references you're going to use, so that you're ready when an employer asks for it. But in today's day and age, where everything's done online, Sherry, more and more of the companies are wanting to get that letter up front.
Yeah.
This question is a really good question, because those companies are not really fully taking into account the extra effort level that's being generated by that. Now,
yeah, and we recognize that too, in terms of if it's something that a recommender, and a lot of times these are blind letters that are going in that you don't necessarily see,
right?
Where they just have a link and they can copy and paste. If you were to organize yourself and send a recommender all the the links that you would need, they could just copy paste, put them all in at once. That might be capable to do it, but you have to do the work on your end to get everything organized, because it's not that hard for me. I write letters as well, just to have something written about you that I'm just going to copy and drop into the link and be able to paste it in. That takes, once the letter's done, doing 1 or 10 is not that hard, but you do have to have that recommendation person really ready and willing to do a letter. You've asked them well in advance. You've given them maybe a little point, PowerPoint, or not a PowerPoint, but a bulleted list of your attributes and your goals, things like that, to make it easy to write the letter.
And Sherry, there have been times when I have done the thing that I really abhor, but I've done it anyway, and I've asked whoever needed the letter of reference from me, go ahead and roughly write it for me and send it to me, and know I'm going to change it, because I don't have the time. I'm
Right.
sorry, but you need to spoon feed it to me at this point, and then I'll work with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing. I mean, you all have to think of it and be planning in terms of the kinds of things that are going to be important to you, to make sure you're not asking at the last minute. You've got something formed up. Here's a sample of something you could put in, or at least rough out the things that you want to do, what you're good at, and some of your attributes. I mean, that at least is the minimum you should do in asking somebody.
And in that case where you can see that you actually do want to apply for, say, 10 of those 20 companies that do that, then when you're asking them to be a reference for you, you might say, hey, it looks like I'm going to need, several to input several letters of recommendation. So let me give you an idea of the strengths I'm talking about in my information. And of course, you do whatever you want, but here, let me spoon feed it for you as much as possible.
Right.
And then you can, maybe they have not done a whole lot of references, so they're not familiar like Sherry is with the fact that you can be organized and sort of have this set up and then just copy paste into a bunch of things. So it might be you have to explain that to them.
There's not too many things, and maybe you all can answer in the chat, that I see that are asking for hard copy letters. Anymore, electronic is, made it very easy just to post a link. That's what we did in the NASA internships that Brian and I ran across all the centers. That was the way we had things done, and we just linked it right to the application. So, again, you have to look at the circumstances. You need to look at dates that are the submission dates by that deadline and have things well in advance. That's why we're talking about this in June, is helping you to get that organization rolling now.
And do make sure be wise and choose the people carefully that are going to represent you, because Sherry and I could both tell stories that we're not gonna about the kind of references that we actually got from some people.
Yeah.
They weren't always as glowing as I think the applicant thought they were going to be. And sometimes it's not that they say anything bad about you, but they just don't. They're not as enthusiastic as
Yeah.
expected.
It's not a ringing endorsement necessarily, other than, I got asked to write this letter of recommendation. Here it is. You don't want one of those. So choose wisely and be thinking about, the beginning of the semester. Do you have people that you know already? Are you brand new? Are there, different people within the department that you're in that you can get to know and build a relationship? Go to office hours. Get some things lined up well in advance. Somebody is asking how long you need for a letter of rec to be, how far in advance should you ask? And I know, being at a university, there is an avalanche right before the deadline, and that just makes grumpy people that are asked to write letters. So, you might be thinking way in
You'll get a
advance.
more enthusiastic recommendation if you ask if you get everything lined up at the beginning of the semester, knowing you're going to be doing this in October or whenever, so that you're ready to go.
Yeah, start that process really early. That's a really critical one, because a lot of people don't think about it till the last minute. They get their resume done, they get their application done, and then they start thinking about, who do I get to write a letter? And so, again, showing you're organized, showing you've looked at all the places you might want to apply, having those things in, having some initiative and having that organization, you're going to do a lot better, especially if you're one of the early askers and not one of the, it's the 200th person that's asked. So anyway, just think about that.
Yeah. All right, getting back on track
Yep.
here. We'll now start going through some of these sections, and really, kind of one of those cardinals rules of organization is, for these sections, you're putting your most recent information first. So you're going in reverse chronological order. It's late in the day. I can't talk well. For both education and the work experience that comes later. And you also want to be consistent with how you do things, and you want to put the information and be kind to the reader. I don't think I mentioned this before, so I will. There's really kind of two audiences or two tasks that your resume's got to accomplish for you. The first one is to survive that quick 20-second test. So I'm sitting here with a stack of resumes. I've got 50, I've got 100. Sometimes in the summer there are 10,000 applicants to NASA internships at large. I'm not looking at 10,000 applicants, but still, if you're looking at 50 or 100 resumes, the first thing you have to do is take a look at them and sort out, who do I want to spend a detailed time and look at carefully, and who gets moved over to pile B. So you really want to be kind to that reader that's looking at it quickly. They need to be able to see where the important information is, be it GPA, be it what your major is, what your skills are, those kind of high level things that at first cut, I say, okay, this is something I want to look at more closely. You can do that by being judicious and using bold here and there to bring the reader's eye to those key things you want them to see, or underlining, or occasionally using italics. But one of the key things is keep your consistency in how you organize your information for each school you've been to or for each job that you've had. So as a reader, I don't have to keep reading the whole thing to figure out the piece of information I'm looking for. And by the way, sometimes it's not necessarily kind to the reader to waste all that white space all over the place. I'm a big believer in 98% of the cases, a one-page resume will do the job if you are an undergraduate student. And if you are wise about how you use that information, use the space on the page, you can get everything in there that is really necessary to be done. And I know when I was faculty at Cincinnati, probably every single student at some point came up to me and said, there's no way I can squeeze what I have down into one page. Not every student, but a lot of students did. And I don't think there was ever a case where we couldn't figure out how to get there. There might have been one or two where there was just a lot of stuff. Maybe it was a student who'd come back to school and had some extra experience. But in 99% of the time, you can figure out how to get all that information on one page, or certainly on one page front and back. But just be kind to the reader that way and put that consistent information. This is another case where I'd say, you don't want to abbreviate things. Don't assume everyone's going to understand an acronym. So most of the time, you need to avoid acronyms. If you're looking at resumes, most of the time, BS is going to be Bachelor of Science. So that might be one of the cases where you can do that if you need to save a little space. But don't abbreviate your major. Spell that out. Make sure it's clear if you've got dual degrees or a minor so that you get that credit early on. Wherever you took a significant number of credits that are relative, go ahead and list those universities. And don't be shy about having gone to a community college. In this day and age, having completed that associate's degree and then moved on to the four-year school is a good thing. It's to your credit that you've accomplished that, you've succeeded at that goal, now you've moved on to the next goal. So don't be shy about putting the other universities you were at. GPA, an important thing. You can talk about awards and activities. If there's just a few, you don't have a separate section for that, you can put that in there. If you are targeting this resume for things where you can really talk about the relevant courses that are going to be important to that specific employer or set of employers, then you might want to highlight some of those. Any kind of special training or seminars that will, you're always looking to what can separate you from the pack. And sometimes there is those special experiences that you've gotten that will help you. Knowing a foreign language can be really important, for example. That's something that is not, that can separate you from the pack in a case where that's important. And certainly by the time you get to your senior year, probably the high school information isn't needed anymore. Hopefully you've got enough other things on your resume. And certainly the GPA at college has now superseded whatever you did in high school.
So Brian, Marzel wants to know, if you have a lot of accolades, awards, and an abundance of work history, then how do you shorten your resume to one page? How do you cherry pick what should be the most important things that actually go on the resume rather than just a litany of every single thing and whatever you did? How do you pick the best?
Yeah, and this is where resume writing is an art and not a science. But here's where the science comes into it, right? You know that if you list 15 things, the reader is going to have a hard time pulling out those key important things out of that list of 15. Suddenly, everything has an equal value psychologically to the reader. So you want to do the best you can to put yourselves in the shoes of the person that's going to be looking at the resume and what you think that is going to be important to them. If you don't have enough experience to feel comfortable knowing that, you've got a lot of resources at your university and you can go get some help on that. You can show this to those people at school that you can go talk to about resumes, and they're going to give you an idea. This is really important to employers. People like Sherry and I that have had experience at this can give you that kind of advice. So lean on other people. And by the way, you will hear my dogs barking every once in a while. I am sitting in my living room. It's
the pack. Yeah. Also, Brian, with Albert wants to know, should foreign language be on the top or the bottom of the resume? I know that some companies like bilingual or trilingual people. Is that something that you should boost at the top, or do you want it down under other activities or whatever?
I could make a case to put it in both places, and you probably could too, Sherry. I think that separates you enough that somehow talking about being bilingual and getting that, I almost feel like you could come up with an objective statement that provides that information up top, and you've now used the objective statement to let them know that you're bilingual up front, and then you go right into the rest of the information.
And Klingon doesn't count. Just
it does
saying.
not. No.
I've seen that actually listed. That's why I'm saying it.
Well, and being a confirmed Trekkie myself, that might endear you to me, but only me
I
when
know.
that's going on your resume,
Well,
when you're
and and
very
and
specific.
I'm going to derail you just for another second. If you're approaching your graduation and almost done with your degree, what are some things you would include in avoid including in your resume? So you talked about high school could drop off.
Yeah.
Um, what would be the things that you're just about to start your professional resume if you're at graduation,
Yeah.
depending on if you're going to grad school?
If,
Um,
if, if you have done an internship or two and now you have that experience that's directly related to your degree, and you go down to that first job or two that you had in high school, and there's nothing about that job that isn't also represented in the other things, now maybe you can begin to take that first job off of the resume. Or if maybe you started out by having the fact that you babysit or you cleaned homes, which I think are both important skills to have and should be on your resume. But if you've now got two internships, degree related, to talk about, they now can cover your work ethic. You now have other ways to show that you have that work ethic on there. So now you begin to take a look at what are the things that are going to be more directly relevant, that that person reading it can say, this is a direct one-to-one match with the kind of work I'm going to have you do in my place of employment where possible. And that's the same thing for those awards and things. Things that your GPA doesn't tell an employer is how you work in a team. What are your leadership capabilities? So for the guys, when I was giving them advice, Eagle Scout's a big deal to put on your resume because it shows a lot of dedication, and you're involved in scouting for a long time. This is an organization. You do volunteer work, all these other things. Volunteer work at your church is a very important thing to have in there. If there's nothing else on your resume that shows that you have that kind of willingness to give back and to work in teams and do those things.
it's the well-rounded kind of resume.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, and I think you're going to cover this, but we can just see if you are, and if it is, we'll push it down. What kind of keywords or character traits that our employers are looking for that would be key?
And yeah, I don't know that that's covered specifically by a site, so I'm glad you've asked that question, Sherry. And
That was Nancy that asked that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Nancy, for asking that question. Sherry, help me out with this, because again, you're looking for leadership, and you're looking for teamwork, and you're looking for those soft skills, the
Well,
clear ability to
right,
communicate and to work well with others and to contribute to a team, not take away from a team.
right. And the other thing um, that I would say that we've seen, Brian, from our data, looking at the back end of all the internship applications we got and who got selected, and I've
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this before, I think, to the Academy, the more software you know within your
Mm-hmm.
industry or your discipline, um,
Yeah.
and now we're hearing your teaming kinds of things, so like what you're doing on the space and virtual teaming. We had an aerospace company here in our lab that was doing a site visit, and they were jaw dropped to know that all of you in the space are actually doing projects as virtual teams. They said, we have sites all over the world, and the fact that people can work virtually on virtual teams as long, as also face-to-face projects, that was a big deal for them. And
Yeah.
as we did, so any kind of software that programming that CAD, things like that, those could be things that the crawlers that are going to be going through looking at applications and jobs, but
Yeah.
also where mentors are shopping and going up and down all those aisles of interns to who see where they're going to put in their checkout cart. That's what we saw heavily is software. So that's just, if you got discretionary time, I would learn some and make sure that you got it.
And Sherry, that's probably my experience would be that when they're putting keywords in, it tends to be more focused on some particular software or IT skill that is important for that workplace that they're looking for. I think that was a really good point. And there is a slide that's going to talk about that a little bit. You definitely want to list. And by the way, the resume is the time. You don't have to be an expert at whatever software skill we're talking about. They understand you're an undergraduate. You are not a 20-year professional at whatever, whatever that software is, at CAD, whatever it is. So don't be shy about putting things on your resume that, you have some experience with. You're not an expert yet, but you are capable, of doing more than just turning it on, if you will.
And you can't fake it. You do
Right.
have to know it and be operable in it, because if you're at a career fair, we hear this all the time with our students here, where they ask you a specific question. Well, if this and this and this and you're in that, what do you do next? Or how do you actually, do this function or something? They've got those questions just to kind of make sure you're just not waving your arm around and saying, yeah, I know that. So, again, be honest, if you're going to learn something, go deep and practice it and be up to skill on it, especially if it's industry standard for what your discipline is.
Right. And by the way, don't forget, don't assume they understand you know how to use Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. Don't take anything for granted in this process. Put
Yeah.
those things down so that there's no doubt that you know how to use those, and there's no question in the minds.
And we had a survey of employers a while back that asked if there was, a specific tool that if students learned deeply, they would question and ask for, and it was Excel. If you know how to really use Excel, not just as a little spreadsheet, but really know how to use all the functionality of Excel, that is another big deal. And
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
widely valued. Okay. Also, Antonio just posted that the Menti code. Did you see that? He's our staff member here. For questions and things that maybe we don't get to, make sure that you look at A73504. So if there's questions for Brian, we're going to capture those at the end, and anything we don't get to, we will get back to you. So.
Yeah, trust me, Sherry will find me and she will ask me those questions.
And Carlos, go ahead. Yeah, just you can go and anybody that hasn't had a question answered by me, go ahead and put it in the Menti, please.
Now, I left this example up here because I wanted to reiterate something I said earlier. You can use bolding to help lead the reader's eye to those key pieces of information you want. So even if you have a relatively busy one page with a lot of information on it, you can organize it properly, and you can use things like bold and underline to lead the reader through the main areas. And by the way, a lot of what you do in the STEM field, right, is organizing information, right? So this is your first chance to prove to maybe that engineering, lead that's going to be looking at your resume, or whatever, scientific major, whatever professor that is, what physics, chemistry, whatever. They're all about information. So, if you have a chock full page, but you've organized it such they can find the highlights quickly, and then they can spend extra time deep diving and finding that other information, that's going to get to me, that's more impressive than if you just left a ton of white space everywhere and only put about 10 things on that one sheet of paper. All right, experience, same thing, most recent first. In rare instances, if you're applying to a specific place and you have a specific experience that really hits that hard, you might want to move that first, or again, you can bold it or do some other things to draw the reader's attention to it. You want to have the company name and location so they know what it is. You want the job title there. Be consistent again in how you organize the title, the time you were there, and whatever it is. And you don't want to talk about salary. Please don't talk about any problems or issues. The resume is not a place to put that negative stuff on there. Keep that away. Any training or development that you got in the workplace, that's something to remember. If it's relevant, put it in. That's extra training that will separate you from all of the rest of the students that are getting the same degree you are. All experience is relative, is relevant. Don't forget that if you're working the restaurant, you're working the fast food, that's still teamwork, interpersonal skills, dealing with customers, work ethic. That's all those things that the employer needs to know about you beyond just what your GPA is and what skills you have on the resume.
And Brian, there was a question earlier in the chat from Irvin, and he's reposted it. where do you put certifications? And what about certifications? Say you started as a business major and you've got certified in certain things, and now you're an engineering major. It's still good, I think, for some of the kinds of certifications to still be
Yeah.
posted that you have multiple areas of knowledge and expertise. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
and that's one of those things where you can make that one of the optional categories if you want, or if it fits under the category of education, just put it kind of underneath where you've listed the schools you're at and your GPA and that sort of stuff, and
So
make
one
sure
of,
it stands out.
yep.
If it's a key certification that will sort of separate you from the pack, so to speak, make sure you've highlighted it or at least put it in a place where the eye is going to be naturally drawn to it.
Well, one of the categories we've started actually adding, and this is where the space would go, this is where your certificates would go, and that kind of thing, is professional preparation.
Yeah.
So we've put it in a different category to kind of show that you are actually, these are workforce development skills that are not just part of your degree program. So the Space Academy, internships, things like that could all be under that kind of category. And again,
Hmm.
it's pointing towards the workforce, which is who you're advertising through for either internships or co-ops or the resume for the job. So
I like
that,
that.
that's something we've kind of come across in terms of a good and intentional category.
A hard thing to do is to paint a clear picture of what you did on the job. So take extra time to think about that. Make sure you show what you've written to friends, family, the people at your university. Go make use of those offices to get extra help on this stuff, because you want to make sure that what you're writing there, what you did, but will someone that doesn't know you, has never seen you before, has never worked at McDonald's, for example, be able to understand clearly what you're doing in that position? And again, this is a STEM audience, so whenever you can use numbers to define what you've done, do it. We love numbers. You love numbers. We love numbers. That's why we like STEM. Okay, action verbs. Also, you want to be you want to have actiony. And by the way, a resume is not a place where you have to follow all the rules from AP English. You can use sentence fragments. You can drop off words that are not adding value to save space. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, you want to be pithy and to the
Yeah,
point, not writing a novel, because you're going to waste all your real estate on your resume.
yeah. And look at the bottom example on this slide here, and notice that they started out by saying, "I greeted customers, I stocked shelves, and I priced merchandise." And then the second sentence is, "accurately managed more than $10,000 in cash and receipts each day." Which should have come first? The second sentence is much more impressive than the first one. We all, and I do this myself, and every student when I would teach these classes would do this too. When you think about what did you do on job X, you start with the most mundane, routine tasks, and you begin listing out, and the cool, more impressive ones don't show up until somewhere down on the second or third line. Be thinking about the fact that this resume is going to be looked at in a 15 or 30-second quick look. Put the thing that's going to impress somebody at the top of the paragraph, not at the bottom. Don't bury the lead. Trained new employees. That's even better. So again, that I love this slide because that is example is exactly, and it's human nature. We start with the basic routine things and then we end up with the stuff that really is the most impressive at the end. So after you've written all that down, take a look at it, and I bet you'll find that you almost completely reverse the order.
Good advice. You know what? You want them to keep reading, so you want to at least get them, if they're busy, you want them to read the stuff that's the most important at the top. That's a really good point.
And it's not irrelevant that you greeted customers. That's a skill we want to know you had. It's just not, it's just you want to hit them with the heavy stuff first. All right, now, Sherry, we've probably built and beaten this skills and achievement stuff
Yeah.
to death. So but there's a few slides here about that. And again, underline the computer skills and technical skills, very important in this day and age to put in there. Leadership positions show that not only, are you writing on the resume that you feel like you have leadership skills, but other people actually put you in positions of leadership. That's great. language proficiency, public speaking. We'll talk about interviews here in a little while, and I'd be willing to bet for 90% of you, the concept of an interview is much more terrifying than putting a resume together, because in America, if you ask what is the scariest thing you can think of, it's not death, it's not anything like that, it's public speaking. So if you have experience in public speaking, that actually does separate you from the pack a little bit. You're comfortable or more comfortable than the average talking. That's an important thing to let the employer know. And here
And
with computer
yep.
skills, we can just lift stuff. Go ahead, Sherry.
No, I was just going to say, I think you cover about social media later, don't you?
I think so. If not, we can talk about it.
Okay, I'll bring it up later.
Yeah, like here, enjoy public speaking and presenting. That, but again, make it true, because I might decide the first thing I do is figure out a way to sort of challenge that if I bring you in, having looked at that resume for an interview. Don't put it past me to figure out, well, he or she said they enjoy public speaking. How can I find out if they're being honest about that?
Well, you might, if again, you've got to be ready to talk about any of these points in a specific thing. The thing that I also know is if you can root it in reality with an example of, write proposals, and then maybe in parentheses after, have had $2 million funded or 50 cents funded or something. I mean, just have numbers and evidence. Enjoy public speaking, have done 15 presentations in this past year, just kind of show that you've actually done something rather than it's just a hobby and you'd do it if you wanted to, but show them that you've actually done things and have some evidence there in terms of something that would give them more credibility in terms of what you're asking to do.
And that's good advice. And if for some reason there's something that you didn't have room to add that extra definition on your resume, be ready to talk about it when you get into the interview. So if somebody says, oh really, you like public speaking, and you can give me 2 or 3 stories where you did public speaking in that environment, you've really succeeded in impressing me right off the bat. All right, so references, we kind of talked about those already. You want to have that list available. When you're sending resumes out in an organized program or a lot at a time, it used to be that you didn't have to go ahead and give those references right away. Now, when more and more stuff is online, Sherry's right, there's more and more times where you don't get that option, and you have to get letters of reference in there. But unless they specifically say it, you typically hold that off until you're asked for it later on in the process.
And Hillary brought up a question about, I talked about the professional preparation, and was getting ready to post, Hillary, I'll say it out loud, putting it in that, an internship in that, especially if it was paid instead of experience. And the only difference I would say is that an internship is usually short term. It's usually, 10 weeks, maybe 15 weeks, unless it's a commuter internship where it's year round and you're doing something that is more job-like. If it's something that you're preparing with experience, again, you could put it in either category, professional preparation or in jobs, but usually that would be a very short-term kind of job. And it's more, again, it's preparatory to getting ready to graduate. So you can choose where it seems to make the most sense. That's what I'll answer that.
Sherry knows this. I'm a big proponent of taking a semester off and getting a full semester's experience as an internship or a co-op if you can. And so let's say you've done that. You've taken the fall off. You've done 16 weeks of full-time work at Johnson Space Center here. Well, that's a very work-like environment. You have been paid, a stipend for doing that. We have expected you to complete tasks that are actually important to the office. That fits nicely in that work, in work experience category. There are other internships that are part-time or are unpaid and are a little looser, and then it would fall into the category that Sherry, that's a really good idea to come up with that category, because it fits those things that work-like but not exactly the same as an employment situation.
Well, plus it's a different category than everybody else has.
That's true.
And again, you're doing 12 weeks worth of within this academy, for instance, you're doing 12 weeks worth of hands-on, team-based project for NASA.
Yeah.
And so this is something that is not going to be in a normal category. It's not a MOOC where you're just like sitting back and listening to talking heads. You're actually doing a project that's getting reviewed by professional engineers and people that have knowledge of the kinds of things we're doing in terms of solar system exploration. So we needed to think about a way to kind of set a new bar basically on the kinds of things you're doing to actually show effort towards your chosen career pathway.
Hmm. All right. While we were talking, I left this slide up, and I'm not going to talk to it greatly. Just know that there are not things that you don't have to talk about in an interview. It's not appropriate for employers to ask you about, and you should know what they are. And it's also both inappropriate and really not in your best interest to be making employment demands before you have been given a job offer, or talking about reasons for leaving other jobs or being negative in any way. So yeah, I knew that was about to come up. So we've kind of gotten at the end of the slides to talk about resumes, and I wanted to just hit up again at a high level, make it clean and be consistent with it so it's easy to read and look at. You will not find all the mistakes in your resume because you know what you wanted to write. You don't see the typos. I'm going to tell the story, Sherry, because it's just too hilarious not to. In one of those classes, there was a young lady. I put her resume up and had everybody take a look at it. It was a really nice resume. It was really in good shape. And she had worked a third shift in a factory for a while. And she wanted to point out that she had never missed, any scheduled work shifts. She just left the letter F out of the word shift. And that completely changed the meaning of that sentence. And I put that up there and I didn't say anything. And I just let the room of 100 people read it, and they were quiet for a while. And then they started figuring it out, and they started giggling and laughing. She never saw it because she knows what the word is supposed to be. It's supposed to be shift. And really literally had to have a couple of people, because I said, do you see it? She's like, no, I don't see it. She couldn't see that word because she knows what it's supposed to be. So have somebody else look at your resume.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I have one other really funny NASA related story about that, and it's
Go
going
for it.
for a job interview. Know who you're applying to. I have a good friend that actually worked for the NSA, National Security, from the people that do all the spy stuff, and they were interviewing a guy, and they were the face-to-face interview, and he said, "I am so excited to be here to interview for NASA." And she said, "You do know you're missing one letter, which is not. This is the NSA, not NASA." And so he was a little both surprised and frightened at the same time. Well, yeah. Oh no. So anyway, know your stuff and don't take for granted that you're enough. You're too close to it, just like Brian said. No, he did not get the job. Actually, he left. He wanted to work for NASA, not NSA.
That is kind of two different audiences.
Yeah, it is kind of, yeah.
All right, so just a couple of slides to kind of summarize here. Resume dues, gather all that information. This is not a first person account. Use phrases with action words. You don't have to use complete sentences. Be brutal in tracking down and eliminating all the errors on that, because we actually, those of us that are interviewing you, particularly when we're interviewing students and for internships and things, we're on your side. We want you to be successful, but we will spot that missing letter quicker than anybody else because we didn't know what you were going to write. So eliminate all those errors. Have an attractive layout, and I put in red there. I added to this slide that one of my colleagues had made originally. Just be kind to the reader. Know that they've got a lot of resumes to look at. Make it easy for them to find the things that are going to be important to them. be neat and orderly, and keep the organization consistent, and we can find our way through fairly quickly. And by the way, that's another reason. My daughter is currently at University of the Arts in Philadelphia. If you are a graphic designer or a creative person like that, it might be impressive to do the most weird, creative type of resume you can think of. If you're going for an engineering or a science job, you want to be able to concisely and accurately convey information. So that's not where you don't want your layout to be totally different than everybody else's, because that makes it harder for me as a reader to figure out where the important stuff is. So, show your creativity in other ways. Be kind to the reader.
Yeah, and I think that Molly's bringing that up now too. You don't want to be you don't want to make them hunt for the important information they need to look for. And if again, if engineering firms are not necessarily looking for really creative, fantastically different resumes. They're down to business. You're in a technical field. You want to make it, professional looking to where they're going to find the most important things, to where they're going to want to hire you or to select you. Don't make yourself an outlier, in a sense, in a discipline that's not necessarily leaning that direction.
Yep, and get feedback. Show your resume to as many people as are willing to look at it and give you honest advice.
That's right. That aren't in competition with you for the job.
That's true too.
just be careful. And you don't want to be able to be thinking about who your audience is. Know your audience of who you're sending this to, and the likely kinds of things that they're going to be looking for that will match the company's intent, or the internship selector's intent. You want to resonate with what they need and be honest about it, but you want to be thinking about what's the need, what's the core value about the company. And one other person just put in here that they wanted to, yeah, Brian, they actually see you now.
I realized a few minutes ago that I'd had the
Camera
video
off.
off because I was just worried about running the PowerPoint,
No.
and I realized that it was kind of mean of me not to actually be.
No, thank you for being visual. Somebody else said that they actually cut and paste, their sponsorship letter to the wrong sponsor. You want to make sure if you're customizing your resumes for a particular job, that you're not tired and cutting and pasting and totally wiping out any chance because you're sending things that were unintentional. So make sure you're you're awake.
I was going to say, and particularly now that they can see me, I'm 55 years old, and I have learned through experience that, writing a particularly delicate email and hitting send about 5 o'clock in the afternoon is not a smart move on my part, because I think my IQ points are lowest between about 3 and 6 or 7. So, you need to recognize in yourself when you're exhausted and
Right.
don't do these kinds of things, at 2 in the morning.
No, and don't send emails, don't send texts. I'm just saying, just from, a lot of bad experiences I've heard about, and you want to leave something till the morning when you get up and have a chance to proof it. Not, you should make sure that you're being smart about your communications at all levels, especially in the professional world, because things don't go away anymore in the virtual world. And you don't want to have something that was really not intentional, or you were just kidding or something be taken wrong and then live there and be resurrected at times that are really inconvenient.
Yeah. All right. Any more good questions on resumes? Now, there'll be plenty of time for more questions at the end, but we can move over and talk about the fun subject of interviews next.
You're good.
By the way, I would be more like the person on the left on the screen than I would be the person on the right. I do not have an interpretive dance for anything. But I do, one of the bad habits I have is I start formulating my answer before the person I'm talking with has finished talking. And a lot of us have that issue. And it's really important in interviews that you be in the present. You know?
And that's a really good question, or a really good thing. That's probably the poor listening skills is another thing that employers really wish people,
Yeah.
especially in teaming, that you actually, the 7 norms of collaboration, I'll put a post on there, or somebody else will, because I just said it. That's another thing to look at on how to be a good collaborator and a good listener. And it comes back to the same kind of thing in interviews and those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. So you want to be in the present. And by the way, what I'm saying is take a deep breath. This interviewing thing is not going to be, it's not going to be as scary as you think it is if you haven't experienced this before, particularly in this environment where you are still in academia, and those people who are coming on campus to interview you or that are looking to hire you as a fresh out or as an intern, recognize you have not had a ton of interview experience left. And they're on your side. They want you to be successful. So you're going to find that it's not an adversarial situation at all, that it tends to be a pleasant conversation. But it's really important to be in the present, be observant, watch and listen. You follow their cues as to what's going on, and recognize that even when you're walking down the hallway or you're walking up, and I think there's another point on the slides that'll say this, and you're talking to the secretary or the administrative assistant before you get to the interview, you know, you're on the clock and representing yourself for a job or for an internship from the time you enter the building to the time you leave the building. And again, like everything else, you can still use these skills that have made you successful in academia. You can prepare, you can learn about the company, you can get some background information, you can think ahead of time about what kind of questions they might ask you, or you can think ahead of time about what kind of questions you would like to know about them, because you're always going to have a chance at the end of the interview to ask your own questions. And it actually can be very impressive if you have thought through and prepared and have some questions to ask about the company or about the specific opportunity. So remember, you're interviewing them as well. Just like, every applicant is not a perfect fit for a company, every company is not a perfect fit for you as an applicant. And it's really important that you know that. It could be the coolest sounding job on paper, but if that company's culture and way of doing things and managing is totally the opposite of your personality and the way you think and are comfortable, you're not going to be comfortable in that situation, and it's not going to be, an enjoyable experience for you.
No, and somebody's been saying that there's a company that right now that he's interviewing for that want him to add a picture to his resume,
Hmm.
which is unusual. And I don't
Yeah, it
know.
is.
Again, legally, you don't have to, because they're not supposed to care what you look like.
That's
So
right.
if it's something you've been hired for, or you're an intern and they'd like to put you on the website, now that's one thing. But, I don't know, that's kind of a little different in terms of saying they want people to add pictures, because that could actually add bias, I think.
Not understanding the context of that or that
Yeah.
company or exactly what it is. I think you hear from Sherry, and I'll just echo it. It raises questions in our minds.
Yeah. So you need to know the intent behind it, and the reason. If you were hired, sure, I'll add a picture. Just saying.
Yep. All right. So again, it's always important to know you're going into this situation. What is it these interviewers want? Well, they want to get to know you. They now have an idea what your skills are, and clearly your skills matched well enough that they want to spend some more time with you. So now they want to get to know you a little bit, figure out what your interests are, what your talents are, get maybe some specific details about some of the experiences and skills that they were interested in. But they're also there to share some of their expertise with you. They recognize they're in a mentorship role, and you have not done a lot of interviews before. So they're on your side. They're there. They want you to succeed, and they're typically willing to maybe answer some questions or to give you some cues as you go along. It's not going to be an antagonistic experience in most situations. They're going to be on your side, and they're going to want you to do the best you can. The best outcome for them is that the first student that walks in and talks with them is so amazingly awesome that they can relax the rest of the day. They know what they're going to do. So, they want you to be successful. So they also they know that it's important for them to clearly and accurately portray what their company is about and what their work environment is. because it's not a good outcome for them, for you to come and work for them and be uncomfortable in that situation or not be a good fit for the way they do business, because that's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for them either. Excuse
So
me.
Brian, is it appropriate to ask why you didn't get a job or internship?
I think so, and there's actually a point, a comment on here that you can politely ask. There, in the 21st century, with all the lawsuits out there in the world and stuff, it's very, it can be very challenging to get an honest answer out of a company that didn't select you, because they are very concerned that you might not just be looking for advice, but be looking for a reason that you can challenge their selection. So it's not easy, but I don't think it ever hurts, particularly when you are in this position where you are making the transition from academia to the workplace, and you are clearly the less experienced party, and they want to mentor you. So again, this is where you sort of mind the cues and be in the moment and make judgment calls about whether you think people would be open to that. And then you remember that later on if you didn't get the job, but you had what you felt like was a good conversation with the person, and you have the contact information to be able to send a polite email. Hey, I'm sorry that I didn't get the position, but I appreciate your time. Any feedback you could give me that might help me in the future is a wonderful thing. That's one of those things where you haven't burned that bridge. That might eventually down the road lead to that company or that employer being interested in you. Sherry, anything you want to add?
No, I think I'm just looking at the questions and things, and I know we have let's see, it's 5:37 or 7:37 your time, and we're on slide. I'm going through your slide deck, and we're on
Sherry
slide
and I were
28.
talking earlier, and when Sherry and I are basically being partners in crime this way, it takes probably another 30% longer to go through the slides.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to post the YouTubes that you want to do, Brian, just in case, unless you want to come back next week and share them and talk about ISS. But
we might need to set that up sometime. I'll see if I could get some of my colleagues to help out, but I don't know if I don't know that I can arrange it that quickly.
No,
all
that's
right,
okay.
So basic tips, and again, these slides are also set up so that you guys can look through them and be able to figure them out. Either set up this presentation so it'll be useful for you after the fact, after this is done. So
and there has been questions to ask, and it's your choice because we're going to give the video to them. Do you mind if they actually have your PowerPoint, or do you want to keep that in-house and just let them have the video? It's your choice.
No, I'm happy for them to have a PowerPoint.
You guys are so lucky. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, you're getting lots of woohoos in the chat. So
you're very welcome. Not a problem at all.
You made a lot of people happy just then. So, but the video tells you all the inside things besides the bullet points that Brian's talking about. So make sure you go back to that. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Voicemail is something that occasionally has tripped up students of mine in the past, because they just didn't think about the fact that professionals might now be calling them and listening to the same cool message they've left for their friends for the last year and a half. So think about all those things and make sure that, remember, you're now trying to present yourself as an adult professional instead of a cool, fun person. So make sure you've looked at all aspects of how they're going to communicate with you, and you've set it up so that you come across as that professional that you're looking to be. All right, research the organization. I can't say that enough. There are two keys to being a good interviewer, to be a good interviewee. One is to research the organization. The other is to do mock interviews and practice it a bunch of times. Practice makes perfect. There is no substitute for actually being asked hard questions in a situation that you didn't see them coming and having to answer them and getting feedback from people on how you did. and mock interviews, I initiated that towards the end of when I was in academia, and it was amazing how many really high-level students, great students, and even they had good answers, but they were fidgeting under the table, or they could not stop moving or fidgeting or saying or whatever that particular catch is, and they didn't see it or hear it themselves. But if you played back a 10-minute video, their jaws would drop and they would say, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that I do that or I say that many times." And that's the first thing. If you don't know that you've got to curb that, you're not going to do it. So take full advantage of as many mock interview, recorded interview opportunities as you can get.
Can I go
Does
back just a minute, Brian? Because I think
do
it
it.
fit in the last slide. Um, the voicemail tip is one thing, but when you talk about social media, companies will go and look at your social media. You should all have a LinkedIn account and have it professional in terms of what you need. So you should have a lot of that's got a go-to place, but they're going to check Facebook. They're going to check all the different kinds of, social medias that they would have access to just to see what your public facing profile and, actions are. So you want to make sure that you're not out there, showing yourself you're going to be, showing yourself that you could be a problem in terms of the way you're communicating certain kinds of things. So just be aware of that and make sure that anything public facing that's accessible, that is about you, is going to be something that you will be fine with in terms of your professional life going forward as well.
Sherry, I'm going to go to the next slide and then put myself on mute because there's going to be some noise here for a second. Can you pick up for a second?
Yeah, I can. All right. So I'm looking at the slide. And Antonio, would you please post the mentee info again? That would be great. So if you don't have social media, no, Brandon, a lot of people are opting in or opting out these days. That's not necessarily a bad thing. LinkedIn would be a really good one, or some kind of professional job, type of deal. That's one that would be good. You don't want to, you know, you want to be thinking about, and I've seen this happen a lot where people didn't think about it, just like your voicemail. You want to have it in a way when you're out there trying to get a professional position, you need to be thinking really serious about that. Um, could you lose, I'm looking at Marzell, could you lose an internship because of nervous breakdown in the interview? You know, getting yourself ready for that. I mean, everybody can have a meltdown. Nobody knows it, but getting enough
Yeah.
sleep ahead of time, not going in, hungry or highly caffeinated. You want to think about what your triggers are, and the way to do that is to really do a lot of preparation. I mean, there's stress questions they can throw at you, but think about the things that, are common. You can look it up on the web. I think Brian could even agree with this. You could look up on the web, usual interview questions or typical interview
Yeah.
questions. Practice those. Think about what those things are that they could throw at you. Don't chew gum. I like that in bold, Brian. Thank you. So, the kinds of things you want to do, you just put yourself in the best position with enough sleep and rest, and have fun. That's the other thing I could tell you. Just go in and have fun. It's something that the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more you at ease you get at it. And it's like getting in
Yeah.
front of a group and talking. The more you do it, you're going to be able to buy down the stress and actually, this could be the start of your future and it could be fun. Don't take it to where it's going to just be something you're totally going to be, totally nervous about. So
and
anyway.
no one expects you. We recognize that you are not an experienced interviewee at this point, and being nervous is not a disqualification for an internship or an opportunity. So, if you're nervous, don't feel like you've got to hide that. Just be yourself.
Yeah, and I'm just looking, if you've had any kind of life experience where you've had to overcome something,
Yeah.
and Joseph, I'm really resonating with you. You're talking about AA and being a recovered alcoholic. I mean, that's showing that yes, you have that. Talk about sobriety or how many years you've been sober. Same kind of thing with any kind of other thing that you may have had happen to you. Brian, what do you think about that in terms of, if that's something that's on his social media, that's what he's bringing
Right.
up.
Yeah.
It's public facing, but it's part that's actually helping other people by acknowledging, that you're helping other people to maybe recognize that and stick to AA or something like that. What would you think about that?
I actually, I think that that's a wonderful thing to have. It actually, to be honest, it gives you such an advantage when you get into these behavior-based interview questions. When were you in a difficult situation, and you know, and had a difficult time, and what did you do to mediate that? You're basically telling a story where you had to pull yourself up, and that's a powerful story that everybody can relate to. So you're taking something that is not the highlight of your life, and you're turning it into a demonstration that you've grown from that experience, and you've got some experience and some character about you that others that haven't gone through that kind of situation would even, have a chance to have.
And I take that same kind of tact in terms of if I'm interviewing. I've been a manager for 30 years, hiring and all kinds of people. And, someone comes to me that's had difficult circumstances and has been able to really
Hmm.
um, come out of that. I mean, that's not saying the next person you hire could end up to be, a drug addict or something, you know, 2 weeks from now, you don't know. And if you've had somebody who said, I had alcoholism, just as an example, early in my life, and college or high school, and realized that that is something I am totally not wanting to go forward with, and was able to overcome that. That's showing credence to me of difficulties and challenges, and they've overcome them. um,
Yeah.
and so it's something, again, you have to use your own gut feeling in terms of what to be transparent about in some circumstances. But I think, in the right
And what you're
circumstances,
comfortable
yeah,
talking about.
yeah, and what you're comfortable. They're not asking you to, just tell them everything about you and tell them your life story necessarily, but just use it, as Brian says, as talking points. If they bring up something, I think things like that could be really important.
Yeah. And to me, if you tell a story like that, and I'm getting to know you, and you're not in any way talking about, making excuses that this happened to that happened, that's very impressive that you had to come to an understanding of yourself, what your own strengths and weaknesses are, and grow from it to get to where you want to go. That's that's important. That's that kind of um, leadership, and that's a self leadership skill right there. You led yourself out of that situation, and you had lots of help in getting there. But again, when we're in this situation, you eventually listened to that advice that you got, and you made use of all the people around you in your experience to better yourself. So
Well,
that's
and
a
it
great
and it
story
shows
to have.
you're making good choices,
Yeah.
in terms of as you mature, you're making life choices that are going to be something that would be, foundational. And those kinds of people, I don't see that as a terrible thing at all.
No.
So,
No. And it falls in line with a lot of these other tips in here too, about showing enthusiasm, and making contact and smiling, and being personable, making a personal connection with those you're interviewing. Be yourself. If you try, if you don't think you yourself, you can't pretend to be somebody else and get away for that very long.
so I'm looking at Johanna, and that's a good question, because I just had somebody bring this up as well. So you're going into a place, you're saying be yourself. You've got a sleeve, tat, whole nice tat sleeve or whatever. Is it something you should wear long sleeves, or can you just be yourself and go in and be who you are? What would you suggest?
Uh, you know, and this is the same situation. You're representing the best you, and through your experience in meeting new people in your whole life, when the right moment is to do that. You just walk in, and based on your personality, you can talk about it. You can do whatever, and you can make it a strength of your situation. Or is it something that you like the people to get to know you for other things first, and then that comes out later? Did that make
Yeah,
any sense, Sherry?
yeah, it did. And I'm just laughing because Katie's telling do not color your hair the night before an interview. I've heard so many stories from people, from hairdressers, that have said somebody accidentally put the wrong colors in, and it came out this horrible color or this crazy
Yeah.
color, and that was never intended. And she said she lost out on a job because she had orange pink hair. So good advice, be yourself, but don't do anything that could cause
Yeah.
risk. Think of, risk and mitigation and things like that. I think
You,
that's,
you know,
sorry,
in
sorry, Kate.
engineering, we have a strong belief in Murphy's law, and that is what can go wrong will go wrong at absolutely the worst time.
Yeah.
So you got to build that in.
Well, yeah, just be thinking and be as strategic as you can and plan your different kinds of readiness and preparation with enough advance notice that you can always get to someplace to fix it if it's not going to work and you need to get it fixed.
Yeah, there will always be time at the end of the interview to ask questions, and do not forget, as you're working so hard to present yourself in the best light, that you are also learning about the company and you want to ask some questions to make sure that company is a good fit for you. Don't lose track that it's a two-way street, this interview. And send a thank you email. Let people know you appreciated their time. That's one of those common sense things that are not so commonly done. And don't be in a hurry. I loved this when I was running the co-op program, and it would always be the highest GPA, highest type A students that would do this. About 24 to 48 hours after their resumes were sent to the employers, they were already sending me an email saying they hadn't heard back from anybody yet. That you're not going to hear back from anybody as soon as they got your resume. And typically you're not going to hear back the next day after your interview either. Be prepared to wait for a while. And that's, by the way, not a bad question to ask. How long do you think this process will last? When do you think that I might hear? That's one of those questions you can ask, and nobody should be offended asking, because you're not being pushy. You're saying, is this going to be a week-long process or a month-long process, or take longer? I just want to get a feel for this. But be prepared to wait. All right, after the interview, use the resources available to you at your school. If you're offered an internship, choose to accept it. Don't forget about getting school credit if that's an opportunity. And Sherry, here's where it comes down to, if you didn't get accepted for a position and you do have a channel of communications back, send it again, another thank you. Hey, I didn't get the job, but I appreciated the time and appreciated the opportunity to interview. And by the way, this is something I haven't had a lot of experience yet. Any feedback you could give me would be appreciated.
I think that's really good.
And Sherry, what we might do is maybe save the behavior-based interview slides that they can look at later on their own, and we can take questions, or we can move.
Yeah, I think that's good, because again, they'll get this and they can go through and they can review these. They're very granular in terms of being able to talk about it.
So I'm going to stop sharing at this point,
so
and that puts Sherry back on the main screen.
Antonio, can you put up the Mentimeter and then post it again?
I don't think I'm a co-host.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Thought I did.
I don't think so.
Okay, then I didn't hit the right button. I did go over and make you a co-host. For those of you that haven't met Antonio, he's on our engineering staff here. And okay, let me find you. Let's see. No, I have you as co-host. It says I can withdraw permission, but can you not share your screen?
Doesn't give me that option.
Okay, so
Sad face.
I'm going to make you the host, and you can make me host back again later.
Okay.
Okay, you're the host. You're in charge, Antonio. I'm going to Starbucks.
I did not do that right.
Where's Dan
Where's
when we
Dan?
need him?
Yeah.
He's on vacation. Dan. Oh well, he's back this Friday, so we'll be all right. I'm posting the Menti question number again.
I can show your your screen, but I can't show mine.
Huh, and you can go down to share?
Yeah.
And Brian, did you stop sharing? There's the Menti questions.
Yes, I did.
All right. It's never too late for coffee. That's right, Joseph. Anyway.
This is an example of that Murphy's Law thing we were talking about a few minutes
I
ago.
think Dan just has job security.
Wow. I'm losing mine.
No, you're not. No. Just because Dan's in Texas isn't going to cause us anything. What we will
See you guys. I
do,
won't be here next week.
you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You already
Peace.
passed all the interviews, Antonio. Anyway, all right, go back and make me a host again. And what we'll do, because I still owe you the questions that Dan recorded from the last Q&A that we did last week. And I will also add these questions in. So Brian, we still have time. Let's do a couple more slides. Is there anything in the last 5 slides or so that you wanted to highlight?
I'm just having trouble recognizing when I'm muted and unmuted. Let me see.
You're good now. You can share your screen back.
Share. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you have the magic.
And really
Tricky interview questions is something Molly just spotted. So that's slide 43, I think, or 42, I guess it is.
Yeah.
40,
well,
41,
one thing, and behavior-based questions, by the way, are just where they're asking for you to pull some experience out of your life that will illustrate something they're looking for. How did you overcome some challenge or work with a group of disparate people, or like Sherry said, the wonderful example being able to work in this setting virtually on a team and accomplishing a technical design goal. And don't be afraid to use this to answer some of those behavior-based questions you're going to get down the road. But again, one obvious thing that we all as human beings do, we spend a lot of time explaining the situation and letting you know what the task was, and then we run out of steam when it gets down to how did I solve the problem and what was the final result. So keep in mind that you want to use this STAR technique whenever you're doing these behavioral type questions and tell the story from start to finish. And that's why it's really helpful, if you're really well prepared, to have built in some stories you're going to use on a regular basis that might answer some of these questions. In the conversation we had, about AA is a wonderful example of story that can answer many of these questions. And it's ready-made for you if you're willing to talk about that.
And again, you want to go back to knowing your audience. Yeah. What's going to resonate with them?
And again, biggest weakness is one of those scary questions, because if I really tell them what my weakness is, they may not want to have anything to do with me. And so you want to be careful and think that through and pick something that is a weakness, but that you can talk about how you're working to turn it into a strength. Or it's one of those things, and you got to be careful not to be too obvious, or you're going to get called on this to say, well, my weakness is I care so much. That's the kind of thing they're not gonna let you get away with that. But do try and talk about something that you can then also talk about how you're working to turn it into at least not a weakness anymore, if not a strength.
And own it. It's yours. You can't just look up something on the web and use that. It could be something that they may probe you about a little bit more. So just be honest, but not pick something catastrophic. Like, I just hate working with other people. That's my weakness. That's not a good one.
My first day on the job working with students in the academic setting, and a student came into my office and he looked at the floor for the full 30 minutes that he was in my office talking to me. And I just, in my own kind of sarcastic way, if y'all haven't figured out, I am a little bit sarcastic, just kept poking him until he finally admitted something that was obvious. He basically said, Professor Dansbury, I just really don't like people very much. Yeah, yes, he was a computer engineering student, so let's just go ahead and say that.
Oh my goodness.
And so I couldn't resist, and I said right away, well, do you think you could fake it for a 30-minute interview? Let's just start with that. And that was the only time in that 30 minutes that he popped up and looked me in the eye, and then he immediately looked back down. He said, well, I guess I could try that. He did get an internship. Now, it was an internship that was a phone interview across the country, but he did get one.
All right. Oh my goodness.
And there are just some of these tricky questions where there's some suggestions and some advice about how you can answer this. And again, I'm being a little sarcastic when I label these as tricky questions. Again, they have a process where they're trying to get at your personality and understand your personality and know if it's going to fit in their organization. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be, it's not going to be a competitive thing where you're going to, feel like you're in conflict. So take a deep breath and relax. And it becomes more of a dance than anything else. So pay attention, stay in the moment, follow their lead, look at their cues as to whether you're getting at the answer they were looking for. And don't be afraid in an interview to have some silence for a few seconds. It's quite all right to gather your thoughts before you answer. No one's going to be upset about that. And on their end, sometimes they're going to pause and because they want to write some notes and they want to take some notes so that they can remember you versus the other 10 or 12 people they're going to interview over the next 4 or 5 hours, so that they can remember you specifically. So sometimes they're going to have to pause too. I think these are things they can look at, Sherry. I don't know that there's anything else on here.
No, that's good. And we're at the top of the hour, so we can do that. Is there any other, should you be taking notes during an interview? Johanna wants to ask.
I don't think there's anything wrong in you taking notes, just like they're going to be taking notes on their side, particularly when you get to the point where you're asking questions about the company and there were things that you wanted to write down. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes you can use that as a placeholder to gather your thoughts, so to speak.
Jaime posted a really good resource there for from his university on action words. So, action verbs actually for resumes. So take that in, look at that, maybe copy that down, because you don't get the chat when you get the video. So you want to go ahead and capture that resource. Obvious links.
There's a couple of slides
the stories
here that an employer would actually come and present to my students about things that have happened at their workplace with interns.
Yeah.
So, even some of the basics, somebody has done it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right. Well, we're hoping that this has been timely and again, getting you catalyzed. Everybody should be applying for internships. You can only apply for most internships as an undergrad. So if you, depending on when you're going to be graduating, and we've had people do this in the past quite often, is postpone if they're graduating in spring and they haven't had an internship, you can postpone your graduation till summer and still be an undergrad and be able to still get an internship. Now we're coming into fall, so that shouldn't be a problem here, but you want to be thinking about the application times. And like Brian said, if you have opportunities to do a semester long internship, it sounds really crazy and scary, and it will put you out of rotation if you're looking at a very, strict course. However, it will give you the opportunity to have a third longer in terms of NASA internship. It's 15 weeks instead of 10. It's much less competitive. And you're not there with 10,000 other interns all at the same time. So you have a lot more face time and a lot more connectivity and time to actually go out and network at some of those places.
It's like you read my mind, Sherry.
It's because we have the same mind, Brian.
And by the way, I also didn't get to say the other favorite thing that I like to say. You're not in a race to get your diploma. What you're doing is you're going through a process to put the skills on the resume you need to get in the end, your dream job. It's not a race. The goal is not to be done fastest. It's to get the coolest job to you at the end.
And when we did a survey of companies that said, when we were running our internship program, we did a questionnaire out there to companies to say, if you had somebody who had a great, GPA, you had a great transcript or whatever, and you had somebody who had a good transcript but had experience, which one would you hire? And it was hands down, they would hire the person with experience. They want people that have been test driven. They've gone out of their comfort zone to do something rather than just academics. They've actually proven themselves and done an internship, having an experience is essential before you graduate. You cannot do that unless you have, because
Sherry, yeah, I'm seeing some of these questions come
yeah,
up, and I can't not answer one I
go
saw a
ahead.
few minutes ago. Yes, the NASA semester internships are paid.
Yeah,
NASA internships are paid. There's a few centers that do a few little things on the
some
side that end
volunteer
up
kind
being
of things.
unpaid.
Yeah,
Yeah, volunteer, but 98% NASA internships are paid. And
right.
the good internships in your field out there in industry are also, for the most part, paid.
And
In
some of
the
those
STEM
actually,
fields.
and some of those actually have year-long where you're working
Yeah.
part-time and you're going to school. If you're in
Yes.
proximity to some of these different, exploration companies and things that are even part of the NASA ecosystem, you can do that. I know JPL has commuter internships. I'm sure most of the centers probably do, and a lot of the companies associated with them in the same business also do. Katie's asking, saying, how long of an internship is required to really count as an internship, Brian? Would you say?
You know, internships run the gamut in terms of length. I've seen short, sort of half term, 5 and 6 week summer internships that are really intense. I've seen part-time internships go across the entire school year. I've seen graduate students take a year off and go work at Kennedy used to do this back and still does this, where they would have graduate students that run
It's
effectively a year-long internship.
it's not one day.
No.
You can't call that an internship.
But here's the thing, think about any job that you've had, wherever it's out, it takes you a few weeks to even be comfortable in the environment to know where the basic things are and do anything. So if you're going to really get value out of a work experience and it not just be like a shadowing, following somebody around and saying, oh, that's interesting, I might like to do that. You're actually going to contribute and do tasks. 10 weeks is, in my opinion, kind of the minimum where you get the chance to do that. And that's
Well,
typically my argument about semesters. If it took you 5 weeks to get comfortable in a place and really get going and get good assignments and know your mentor, if you're there in the summer, in a month, you're gone. So you've only got 1 month to really do something. If you're there in a semester, you've got 10, 11 weeks left to really get in and get some stuff accomplished.
well, we have a Lucy internship going on right now here at ASU that's 5 weeks long, but it is super intensive and they're actually skilling up. So they're putting in about 200 hours of time that's actually, learning CAD, getting qualified in the machine shop. They're actually 3D printing, so additive manufacturing. They're testing things in space conditions that they're building electronics. I mean, they're doing a really intensive skill up. And so it just depends on what it is you're doing and how you describe it in terms of that counting as a really good internship. And I think that that's really important.
One of the last slides that we didn't get to shows intern.nasa.gov, where you can go to and find out information, because I'm seeing lots of questions come out about NASA internships. And there are also these pathways. What used to be called co-op programs are now called pathways internships.
Yep.
And most of the center HR departments will run those individually, but the internship programs are for the most part centrally run out of what used to be the Office of Education. Now it's the Office of STEM Engagement at NASA.
So people that are post-backs, Brian, have an undergrad and they're coming back to get another undergrad. Does that qualify them?
Yeah, from NASA's standpoint, if you are working full-time towards a STEM degree that would qualify you for employment, then you're
You're
qualified
good.
for
Yeah.
the internship.
Okay.
Yeah. And that includes the breaks in between. If you are registered to go to graduate school and you're going to have just completed your undergraduate degree, you would still be open for an internship.
Well, and there's
still in that pipeline going
right.
for that degree.
And there's still fellowships. There's other things that you can get for a graduate degree that's different, and it's got different rules. So you just need to look and see what those things are. And Kenzie, you have to have at least one to get under your belt as an undergraduate if you can manage that. There's Space Grant in every single state that have internships as well. And so that is something that you can check. Every single state across the U.S. has a Space Grant. So look it up for your state, and they run programs and internships as well.
And I saw the citizenship question come up, and at least for NASA, because the money is tied from Congress, there is a citizenship requirement because we're basically using taxpayer money to fund the interns. So that's not something that it's basically a requirement. It's not a choice by us. That's the way it's got to be.
Right. It's taxpayer money, so they're using it for U.S. taxpayer or people that are here. So, again, Space Grant is a good thing. NASA.gov, is it /internships or what again is
Uh,
the? Okay,
intern.nasa.gov
there you go.
is still the website for the majority of internships. And then pathways, you have to go look at the HR departments at the various NASA centers, and they are required to post into the USA Jobs site, which is the same one you use for full-time government employees. So you've got to go through that process.
That's right. And for international students, Anna's asking, should they say they're from another country in the resume or not? Depends on the kind of job you're applying for.
Yeah,
I would say.
exactly. If you are qualified, if you're qualified, that shouldn't matter. I really think that's up to you how you want to bring that up, because you speak another language, so you are bilingual for the most part. So you've got that going for you, and if you point that stuff out and things, people are gonna. At NASA, that rarely is an issue from our point of view, so it's not something you would need to.
So I'm gonna make your head explode, Brian.
Do it.
Because I know this is so dear to your heart. Why are there so many different application portals for NASA? For JPL,
I saw that one.
For NASA Force, for USA Job. Yeah, we know that. We feel your pain. We've tried to fix that between us.
Yeah, just between us, and you guys don't ever tell anyone that I told you this.
Oh,
the idea that there is one NASA is not entirely accurate. NASA is made up of 10 individual research centers across the country. Each of them have their own personality, their own history. I was a co-op at Langley Research Center that was founded in 1917. That is clearly before NASA existed. So there was a life at Langley before Langley became part of NASA. Because of that history, they have their own HR departments, their own way of doing things. And NASA is just so big that there's a lot of moving parts. And when you have that many moving parts, you have people who tend to think, I don't want one monolithic program. I think I can do something better for my needs over here in the corner. So there's a lot of that going on.
Well, and again, apply widely. Look at all those portals. Yeah. Look for the places you want. You have to do that. And I will encourage you, if you have the choice to slide a graduation date a little bit longer, again, look at it financially, look at all the things, make sure scholarships will stay in place if you have those. But if you have a chance to get an internship before you actually graduate, we have a very common friend of ours now that is actually got his dream job, and he did it because he slid he got his internship before he graduated. He slid his graduation date twice, actually.
He's now in training as a flight
mission control at NASA.
Yeah, mission control flight console person.
So we may have him as a walk-on, so we won't tell too much about him for another time.
You can let him tell his own story.
Yeah, cool. He's his own story. He's actually part of the big university thing where they interviewed like 5 different early career people, and he was one of them. So you know what? It doesn't matter what your background is. You need to. It's additive.
Clearly, his reputation has made it to some of the people in this group. I just saw his name pop up.
Yeah, Amelia, it's Sunny. And if you haven't heard Sunny's story in the past, we need to bring Sunny on. It is such an incredible journey that you will never, ever feel like you can't do it after you hear his story. So it's something that, again, you want to be thinking about it. And, you've got to think about in astronaut candidacy. I'm looking at you, Enrique. You need to do your homework and figure out, what the astronaut corps has, what it's likely to be. There's going to be commercial space astronaut corps. There's going to be a lot of different things. I think we had something like 48 working astronauts right now.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that, for the right stuff in Apollo, Air Force test pilot was a key way to get there. But this day and age, scientists, educators, being a good communicator, multiple degrees, the astronauts are very diverse, not just from a demographic standpoint, but from an experience standpoint.
Yeah. So anyway, we just, do your research, look at what it is, follow your passion. That's the biggest thing. What excites you that you could go to work every day and do? Think about the things you really care about. Think about the things that you could be interested in for a long time, and also that won't be taken over by AI. You know, artificial intelligence is going to be changing the landscape of the jobs of the future. So you want to be thinking about things that won't be eclipsed by, you know, future things that are going to be not necessarily done the same way anymore. You think of the things that will absolutely still need people as a critical element of that job to get done, not something that can just be automated. So that's one of the things we've seen a lot of talk about AI and some of the things that are changing. You need to kind of get read up on that and just think about that through the filter of what you want to do, and make sure that you still have a you know, a horizon out there to be important. Okay. All right. I think we're going to let you go. Enjoy yourself, Brian.
Take it easy,
And
Sherry.
no,
It was. I appreciate all the questions, everybody. You're in a great program. I know you're taking full advantage of your opportunities. Keep it up, everybody. Good
well,
luck to you.
I've seen a lot of notes all the way through here. This is the best kind of presentation we've had anywhere. Everyone's thanking you in terms of this is really good advice, and thank you for just all the points and all the talking points. I think that's why we like having you here. You have such a wide experience, and being in the middle of NASA for so long and seeing all sides of it is really important. So we're trying to help you be successful. That's our job. And Brian, thanks a
Yep.
bunch. All right.
All right. Everybody take care.
Thanks. All right. With that, we will go ahead and we'll get Dan to download the Menti. We promise we'll have it up before next week, along with the last questions of anything with the instruments and things. We did post the prices of different instruments that are used a lot in space exploration. We have, you know, again, a crew standing here to be able to answer questions. If you do, send them to the space, and Dan and I will sort them out and get them back to you quickly. So the CAD software, Molly, we do have Solid Edge. And do you have, Antonio, I'm looking at your face, do you have that ready to send out if people want to request that? We're still working on the NX, Full Up NX, which is the next step up from Solid Edge. If you've never done CAD, it's really not a bad thing to get into Solid Edge and start learning a little bit about it. But we hope to have the Full Up NX hopefully before the end of your internship or your experience with this academy. So we want to be able to get that. So send us your request. We've been answering requests for Solid Edge all week, and we can get it to you as well. And SolidWorks, Ryan, we use both. And having more than one CAD is a very good thing, because again, companies use a lot of different things. So we're just trying to get you to have the chance to get that resume skilled up, and we have this offer that a lot of universities don't, and that's why we're trying to do that. Okay, so what about future times? We've got some other, again, great presentations. How many of you have heard about Dragonfly? Mission Dragonfly. I see hands. All right. Well, we have the head person from Dragonfly that's going to be our presenter in a couple of weeks or a few weeks here. So you'll have a chance to actually hear about a real mission that's been proposed to Titan, and you know, again, get some experience. So we've just got some late breaking news on people that have accepted invitations, and we have a great lineup for you coming up. So with that, let's go ahead and probably just, you know, say goodnight, everybody. Oh, and you're all unmuted now.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a great 4th of July. Have a great holiday next week. We'll miss you. We'll see you in
See everyone in a couple weeks.
2 weeks. That's right. Have a great
Looking forward to
time.
seeing everyone.
All right. Good night.
Good
Night, everyone.
Thanks for coming tonight. We'll send out the link. We'll get Dan to send that out before the end of the week.
Thank you for getting the person from Dragonfly, Sherry. Yeah, no, our pleasure. Zibby is going to be a great presenter, so we're really excited. Very timely. So thanks, everybody. Be safe. See you in 2 weeks.
Hi, guys.